Voting. It's the cornerstone of democracy. But as you presumably know, with a first-past-the-post election, vote splitting often results in an outcome that a great many people do not like. Ranked choice voting, also called preferential voting, is used by most political parties when members select their leader and their candidates, but it too has some significant problems. This video will explain the problems and will propose a solution. When an election is held, the optimal outcome is to select the person that is preferred by the most voters to the greatest degree. Sometimes the optimal outcome is intuitively obvious, as it is in Alex Gendler's TED Ed video, which imagines 4 colonies on Mars voting on where to locate a new spaceport. Intuitively, we can readily see that the North Base is the location that will be preferred by the most people to the greatest degree. Methods of processing ranked ballots can be tested with this simple scenario, and if the method doesn't result in North Base being selected, then that ballot processing method should not be used. The United Conservative Party of Alberta uses a ranked ballot, and the processing steps are specified in Section 5.8 of their governance manual. These steps are the same as what most organizations follow. 5.8. If following the tabulation of votes, no leadership contestant has received more than 50% of the total number of first preference votes cast, then 5.8.1. The leadership contestant with the fewest number of first preference votes cast will be eliminated. 5.8.2, for the ballots for which the first preference was the removed leadership contestant, the second preference votes will be allocated to the remaining leadership contestants. 5.8.3, the votes will then be retabulated, and if a leadership contestant has received more than 50% of the total number of votes cast, that leadership contestant will be declared the winner and will immediately become the leader. 5.8.4. If no leadership contestant has received more than 50% of the total number of votes cast, this process will be repeated, eliminating one leadership contestant at a time until a winner is declared. As you have just witnessed, the standard method will not consistently select the outcome that is preferred by the most voters to the greatest degree. Coming up next is a 1-minute video clip that provides another simple scenario that exposes a shortcoming of the standard method. Following the video will be an analysis that explains what needs to be done to get a consistent and accurate outcome.
But there's also a problem with instant runoff. There can be cases where a candidate doing worse can actually help get them elected. Let's say we have 3 candidates, Einstein, Curie, and Bohr. Now, Einstein and Bohr have very conflicting views, while Curie is ideologically in the center. So let's say Einstein gets 25% of the vote, Curie gets 30%, and Bohr gets 45%. No one got a majority, so it goes to the second round, with Einstein being eliminated, and because people who voted for Einstein put down Curie as their second choice, well, Curie ultimately gets elected. But now imagine that Bohr has a terrible campaign speech or proposes a very unpopular policy, so bad that some of his voters actually switch over to Einstein's side. Well, now it's Curie that gets eliminated. And because she's more moderate, half of her voters select Einstein and the other half select Bohr in the second round. And this leads to Bohr winning. So Bohr doing worse in the first round actually leads to him winning the election. Clearly, this isn't something that we want in a voting system.
The selection of Madame Curie after the second round, with 55%, might be a good choice, but we find out later that half of her supporters chose Bohr as their second preference. In light of the fact that he had 45% of the first preference votes, that 15% takes him to 60%, so perhaps he's the best choice. What was never disclosed in the video is the second preference of the Bohr supporters. If many of them put Curie as their second preference, then she is a good final choice. But if not, if they didn't have a second preference or they preferred Einstein, then Bohr is the candidate that's preferred by the most voters to the greatest degree. This next example shows that an unpopular radical can end up winning, and it clearly shows the importance of factoring in the second preference of all of the voters.
1,000 voters, 8 candidates. One candidate has a lot of support, but not the 50% plus 1 that's required to win on the first round. There's one strong contender, 4 other contenders, an unpopular radical, and a person that is perfect but has no chance of winning. First round results are as follows. Supporters of candidates B through H want anybody but A, so A gets ranked last on 501 ballots. Everyone loves H, but since H has no chance of winning, they put H as their second choice. 998 voters put H as their second choice, and 2 voters put H as their first choice. The unpopular radical, starting in second last with only 48 votes, can end up winning with 501 votes. That's certainly a problem.
As was mentioned when analyzing the Einstein-Curie-Bohr example, it's important to look at the alternate choices of all of the voters. In this example, doing so would disclose that candidate H was the second preference of all of the voters that chose someone else as their first preference. Recalling now the Mars example, the second preference of the people living in the West Base would no doubt be North Base, so factoring in all of the available voting information would indeed result in the selection of the North Base. The next video clip explains the favorite betrayal criterion, which is another risk when ballots are processed using the standard elimination steps, as laid out in Section 5.8 of the UCP Governance Manual.
Let's say there are 2 major parties in your city. Imagine that you like one better than the other, so we're going to call them the good party and the bad party. Here's the good news. The good party has a 10-point advantage in your city and wins most elections. The bad news is that your city uses plurality voting. And the upcoming election for mayor has 3 candidates. And you really like the independent candidate this time. Even though he's your favorite choice, you know you can't vote for him. If he takes too many votes away from the good candidate, that would cause the worst candidate to win. Wouldn't it be great if your city used a voting system that didn't have this problem? How about instant runoff voting? Then you can vote for your favorite. With instant runoff, when your ideal candidate gets eliminated, your vote moves over to help the good candidate win. That's great, right? But what happens when your ideal candidate does even better? What if he actually beats your second choice and your second choice gets eliminated? Unfortunately, that puts us completely at the mercy of these voters that we have no control over, those who voted for the good candidate. And who did they put for their second choice? It would be nice if they had all put our ideal candidate second, but they didn't. It takes only 1/5 of them putting the bad candidate second for him to win this election. What happened here? Doesn't instant runoff eliminate the spoiler problem? It turns out that putting your favorite first in instant runoff is only safe when your candidate is very strong or has no chance at all. In between, there's a good chance he will have to face your least favorite candidate before he's ready. In this way, putting your favorite candidate first can cause your least favorite candidate to win. Ouch. In fact, if you and some of your fellow idealist supporters had forgotten to show up, then your favorite candidate would have been eliminated, but your second favorite candidate would have won. Does this problem happen in every election? No, this does not happen in every scenario. It doesn't happen this way when the third candidate pulls supporters from both of the major candidates equally, but it does happen whenever he pulls mostly from one and not the other. To me, that sounds like a lot of the 3-way elections in America. What about later no harm? Instant runoff advocates are fond of quoting the later no harm principle. Adding a second choice, third choice, or more to your ranking will never hurt your first choice. Guess what? This is completely true. But note how carefully it's worded. It never says that it's safe to put your favorite candidate for your first choice. With instant runoff voting, your first choice has to be a safe candidate. Someone who can beat your least favorite. Putting your favorite candidate first might cause your second choice to get eliminated and your third choice to win. So later no harm is great, but it's not a promise that it's safe to put your favorite first. Be careful voting for your favorite with instant runoff voting. You might eliminate the strongest candidates and cause your least favorite candidate to win. If you want a voting system that avoids this problem, then you care about the favorite betrayal criterion. The favorite betrayal criterion says, voters can never get a worse result by expressing the maximum support for their favorite candidate.
When all of the voter data is factored into the outcome, voters can put their favorite candidate first without any risk. Ballots should be processed in such a way that the outcome cannot be manipulated by strategic voting. One good way to process the ballots is the Condorcet method. Each candidate is compared in a head-to-head matchup with every other candidate. And if one of the candidates wins all of the head-to-head matchups, then they are deemed to be the best choice overall. But there's a problem, and this short video clip explains it.
But will there always be a winner in this way? Let's try Condorcet's method for choosing dinner between you and 2 friends. There are 3 options: burgers, pizza, or sushi. you really like burgers, so that's your first preference. Your second choice is pizza, and you put sushi last. Your friend prefers pizza, then sushi, then burgers, and your other friend prefers sushi, then burgers, then pizza. Now, if you choose burgers, it can be argued that sushi should have won instead, since 2 of you prefer sushi over burgers and only 1 prefers burgers to sushi. However, by the same argument, pizza is preferred to sushi and burgers are preferred to pizza by a margin of 2 to 1 on each occasion. So it seems like you and your friends are stuck in a loop. Burgers are preferred to pizza, which is preferred to sushi, which is preferred to burgers, and so on. This situation is known as Condorcet's paradox. Condorcet died before he could resolve this problem with his voting system.
In addition to the risk of not getting an outcome, the Condorcet method doesn't always select the candidate that is preferred by the most people to the greatest degree. One candidate might win the head-to-head by a very small number of votes. If a large number of their supporters chose the other candidate as their second preference, but the reverse was not true, then arguably the other candidate should be selected. Processing the ballots like a double elimination tournament results in all of the voter data being analyzed, and in all of the scenarios tested so far, the winner has always matched the Condorcet choice. So, the solution, promised at the beginning of this video, is to use the double elimination processing and check the second preference of the supporters of the final 2. Whenever there is a Condorcet winner, confirm that it's the same. To close this out, here's a 3-minute clip that explains what happened in Alaska in 2022, which will impress upon you the importance of promptly changing the way political parties process ranked ballots. Because in Canada, we are using ranked ballots to select party leaders, some of whom become the premier of a province or the prime minister.
This is a big deal, because moving past our polarized two-party duopoly requires at the very least an election method that can reliably deliver with more than just 2 viable options. The world of voting science is replete with contrived examples and edge cases that can challenge any method. But for RCV, this flaw has played out multiple times in the real world. Alaska's very first use is case in point and closely mirrors the fruity example. In 2020, by a razor-thin margin, Alaskan voters radically overhauled their election process, moving from a partisan primary with a choose-only-one general election to a top 4 open primary with a ranked choice general election. In the summer of 22, Alaska used this system for the first time in a special election to fill its sole federal representative seat due to the passing of Joe Young. Of the top 4, 1 dropped out, leaving 3 candidates on the RCV ballot: Democrat Nancy Peltola and Republicans Nick Begich and Sarah Palin. The voters as a whole expressed clear preferences in that vote. Strict majorities of voters ranked both Peltola and Palin either last or not at all. A supermajority of voters, more than 70%, put Begich in either first or second position. Compared head-to-head, a strict majority of voters preferred Begich over Palin, and by a plurality preferred Begich over Peltola. As with Golden Delicious, Begich was the only candidate in the race who had any kind of majority support from the voters at all, and was also the strong beats-all candidate versus both of the other 2. But because RCV looks at only one part of each vote in each step, and because of the lopsided candidate positions in the field, 1 Democrat, 2 Republicans, RCV eliminated Begich first and elected Peltola over Palin with any kind of support from less than 50% of the ballots cast. Voters who put Begich first got their second choices counted. Voters who put Palin first never had their second choices counted at all, despite their first choice losing. This is not a political commentary on the various candidates. Peltola moved quickly to shore up support across the aisle and earned actual preference from a majority of Alaskan voters in the general election several months later. Yet the blowback from Alaska's first use is noteworthy. Grassroots organizers there successfully petitioned a repeal of RCV and Top 4 to the ballot for voters to consider this year. In this cycle, both Republicans and Democrats have worked to narrow the field in many Alaskan races in order to avoid a repeat of RCV's spoiler effect. And nationally, 10 states have outright banned ranked choice, staining voting method reform generally as yet another partisan battle.
Thank you for watching, and please take action so that there's no new example of why the change is needed.